And I didn't expect to be as into that idea as I am, but the more I listen to him talk about it, the more sense it makes.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. I like the idea. I mean, I've also pondered the idea of a system that we're interacting with. This makes way more sense to me just on a logical scale. If you were to say we're, populating the universe or seeding life throughout the galaxy or whatever it may be, doing that yourself seems like just such a menial task. If you have already the capability of bouncing around the universe, I don't think you'd be doing the actual physical groundwork at all. I think you'd probably have a system in place, and that system's probably heavily reliant on some type of artificial intelligence, some really advanced, sort of biologically integrated artificial intelligence system. And so, whether it's the genderless grays that are performing these, genetic experiments, or whether it's just the crafts that are uninhabited and that are flying around, I think it does strike me as like more of a logical conclusion. I still am not totally on board with like the first half of that theory though, which is like the poltergeist stuff.
Like to move you around from and distract you from place to place.
That's a big pill for me to swallow. I think Patrick's background is in sort of poltergeist haunting activity, so it does feel to me at least as sort of like retrofitting this theory into what he'd previously done. But I do think that in doing so, he discovered that, these spheres seem to have like some type of pattern, but who knows?
Yeah, it was unclear to me, and I'm not all the way through it yet, so maybe he addresses this later. And I need to read the book and see if there's more in there. But it's unclear to me that what those particular sites, those haunted sites, would have to do with anything that would necessitate some kind of like quantum capable sphere technology being deployed there for the purpose of keeping people distracted and spooked all the time. Like I don't know what the practical outcome you're trying to achieve.
There's definitely some flaws in the theory, which it's fine. It's more of a hypothesis, but the idea as well that like they can phase through objects, I think he mentioned, and for me that just kind of like, well, then why wouldn't they just be underground? Why wouldn't they just be in the ground instead of like in a house or something? But maybe he's got an answer for that as well. I didn't really address it on the podcast, but interesting nonetheless. But the second half of that, I think, is very plausible. I mean, you have so many images of these spherical sort of formations, these triangular formations with the spheres throughout the world. Hard to tell.
Well, he talked about how he's like when it's energized, it lights up because there's a ball of super plasma around the sphere, but it's the metallic sphere is what's in the middle. And that made sense to me. And then I was thinking like, okay, the Foo Fighters and all of these, we've seen so many little things of these spheres interacting with each other and doing other things. And he's like, when they're powered down or at low power, they don't glow. So that would explain orb sightings to some degree. It just seemed to fit. It checked a lot of boxes for me. It was just interesting. And I feel like that there's been a lot of talk lately about these spheres, and it's kind of all gelling into some kind of automated surveillance system or some kind of automated management system.
I messaged you, Chris, when I was 12 minutes in, and I'm sure you remember I messaged you. I was just like, I got to talk to this guy. So I dropped him an email. And then unfortunately I was in Washington and then I was on vacation last week, but we have connected. So I'm hoping, because I have the cosmic internet hypothesis, which has a lot of parallels with what he was saying. So I'm hoping I can get together with him, because I don't know if he's actually UK based. I think he is. Yeah. So I'm hoping I can maybe get together with him and sort of combine ideas in a way. That might be cool.
Super interesting. I think it's fun that we're coming up with like new theories, in that the hypotheses, and that these are actively, being studied by many people. I'd be cautious not to throw all your eggs in one basket with any plausible theory or hypothesis, just because I do believe we probably most likely are dealing with more than one thing. And it's probably really messy and really muddy, and it probably involves time somehow. And all very, very strange. So it's I'd be cautious not to lump it all together.
Yeah, I feel like it's more than one thing as well, and it's more complicated than just one. There's no one simple explanation that explains it all, but I do think to something Xander was saying earlier. Xander made this great point about how like the closer you get to the middle, or the closer you think you're getting to it, the darker it seems to get. Like
Yep.
we really don't have an idea of distance, but there's a sense of temperature. It gets colder the closer you get to the middle, and people get weirder and they talk less. You know what I mean? It's just like weirdness there, and I wonder, like, do you feel with regard to the cover up? Do you get the sense that it's going to be resolved ever, or is this a catastrophic disclosure thing where we just kind of find the truth out?
I think aliens and UFOs are not the most interesting part of all this. I do believe there's a time component to this, and I don't mean to say like a machine or the capability to travel back on a linear time scale, but I do believe that there is some type of either monitoring, manipulation, or at least just observing of time in some way. I think that's probably the deepest and darkest part of all of this. And I think to an extent, I would also argue that maybe a lot of this other stuff is just misdirection.
Really?
I mean, I would argue that maybe a lot of it is, not all of it, but maybe a lot of it, yeah.
I feel like that could be, yeah. Like what gives you what makes you feel like it's a time travel centric thing? Like where do you get the sense
Again,
that
I would be careful not to say time travel. I would definitely say sort of metric engineering in some fashion or form. I think there's very, very high end physics going on here, obviously. And I think that at the tip of that, I think you're just faced with, space and time at the end of that. I don't think it's just space. I think if you're messing with that, you're messing with the other thing too.
Is it fair to say that at some point technological prowess kind of throws time out the window in the traditional sense, so that you're not necessarily building time machines, but you're using craft on a daily basis, for example, that are in a way manipulating space-time in an extreme way, and it potentially does things that we can't really comprehend right now because we've never experienced anything like it.
Yeah, there's definitely. Yeah, I think there's a few different ways that you can interpret how time plays a role here, or how we interact with it in the program sense. And I think it probably has to do with consciousness. I don't think it's completely nuts and bolts. And I think that there are some nuts and bolts that can amplify that interaction. There was a podcast with UAP Gerb that I did. We had touched on it briefly, that he was speaking to someone who, claims that they were interacting with some type of sphere, and, it would have some type of way of allowing him to peer into time, not unlike looking glass type technology. And then I'm reminded as well, there was, I believe it was on Substack or Medium or one of the two platforms, where there was a quote unquote psionic asset that kind of talked about their gate experience. Do you guys remember this?
No.
Okay. And it goes really very, very deep into, this person's history with GATE, which is, the Gifted and Talented Education Program, and how he was sort of sequestered into a official psionic type program.
Was that Grush?
No.
It wasn't Grush? I thought Grush was fast-tracked into some kind of super student program also. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Could be.
Barber
also
was in the GATE
Jake
program.
Barber.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that person in this article, mentions, is very interesting, but they they mention sort of the out of body state, and that they were. This is where it gets like super sci-fi. That they were constructing grid-like patterns, not unlike the ones behind us right now on the screen, in this other dimension. He also said the hardest part was to go back to these places, so there was some type of permanence when they went there, and they would seed it. They would drop markers on this grid-like structure, and these markers, when triggered, would collapse a certain wave function in our linear time. And so I go, wait a second. Are we seeding reality? Is that like the darkest part of the program, is the fact that we can, through intention, collapse waves and it's not random like we thought? And that, there's this whole and I'm getting a weird phone. I'm getting a weird phone call by a number I don't recognize.
Get a text. Stop talking. So who was this related to? Okay, so who was this that you were hearing this from?
I can't officially say the person,
Okay.
but because it was written anonymously.
Okay.
But it's out there.
So the idea is that there is a technology that helps, like, allows people to zoom out and sort of see the map of time and collapse wave functions by
something to that effect. Like they were using these children to do so, and that these children were also given like hormone blockers to stay young, because after puberty it had some type of different effect on the psi ability, and all types of really weird stuff. But like you said, you get closer to the center and it gets spookier, it gets much weirder, it gets darker. And when involving, of course, we've heard these stories of the human trafficking in order to create psionic assets and stuff like that, right? It's like that, I think, is a very dark part of it. That's, some collateral damage that none of us want to really admit to, I suppose.
Would this be like Mandela effect kind of stuff?
Perhaps. I think, I don't know. You start to tie you start to connect the dots. We look at what Dan Burrish was saying about, the sort of protecting this one timeline. And then, maybe that's the darkest part of it. Maybe that's the biggest, like, wouldn't that be worth protecting? And you hear about, again, these, what was the movie that everyone was referring to?
What was that German series, Dark?
Oh, Dark as well, yeah. But I was referring to the Adjustment Bureau.
Adjustment, yeah.
And if you had, let's say, you wouldn't need to technically time travel. You would just need to peer into time far ahead enough on these different paths and intercept whatever variable, or snuff it out, whatever variable, affected the main timeline that you're trying to create,
that's
right?
So crazy.
But say you had this, and then all of a sudden you're showing up, you got Men in Black showing up after, nothing's been reported. Like they're already there. They're like knocking on the guy's door in Iran, like the night after.
Mm-hmm.
This incident. They're American. You're like, how did you know about this? How did you get there so fast? So I don't know. It turns into a weird, sci-fi movie, but that's kind of what I'm into. I'm into the super weird stuff.
I like the super weird stuff. I think the time travel, that side of it starts to make me wonder if it is something as simple as, like, we're in a simulation and we're on the cusp of figuring out that we're in a simulation and they're watching us. Like, so when they come, it's like in Total Recall where Schwarzenegger's in the thing and the guy shows up and he's like, if you take this pill, you'll wake up and you can go home.